Houston, we have a problem. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. Today we have something special for you guys, the viewers, the subscribers, the Scrapaholics. As I'm sure some of you already know, but we recently hit 10,000 subscribers on this channel, so we have teamed up with Knipex to give back to you guys. Yes, the Scrapstang has reached 10,000 subscribers, but 10K does not only mean 10,000. It also means we're giving away 10 Knipex Cobra pliers. This is one of their staples. It is the 10-inch Cobra water pump pliers that you guys have seen me use various times here on the channel. So let's get to the point. How do we enter this giveaway? One, obviously you have to be subscribed to the YouTube channel. Two, go ahead and give us a follow on Instagram as well as Knipex. And lastly, number three, drop a comment down below letting us know what your dream project car is. That will get you one entry into this giveaway. But just a reminder that the members on our Patreon get an automatic 5 extra entries into this giveaway. So once again, thank you guys for 10,000 subscribers, and also a huge thanks to Knipex for celebrating it with us. With that being said, let's get to work. So previously we roughly routed all of the engine wiring, where we also made our own wiring diagram because we since have relocated some things to give us a cleaner engine bay. But as you guys can see, we have the engine covered by a trash bag right now. We had to protect the valley from debris and dust because we had no intake, but that is no longer the case thanks to our Scrapstang community. They have fully sponsored this intake. Huge thanks to the Catman, Justin Collins, and Michael Sanchez for sponsoring this intake. This is an Edelbrock Performer RPM, which is a bit different from the Performer series we installed in the past on this channel. I'll get into the specifics on the intake in a sec, as well as explain to you guys how this intake gasket can make more power than this intake gasket. Next up on our upgrade list, we have a set of Hedman equal length shorty headers, which I picked up on Facebook Marketplace for 80 bucks. So before we get this installed, I wanted to explain the intake gasket situation and how this gasket can make more power than this gasket. So if we take a look at the underside of our intake, this hole in the middle right here is an exhaust passage. So therefore the exhaust gases will go through here, heat up this plenum, and then cross all the way over to the other side. It was designed that way in order to heat up the carburetor as well as the intake itself for better cold weather performance. But here in Arizona, this hole is going to cause nothing but heat soaking issues and vapor lock issues, and it can also decrease performance because if the air is hotter, it means it's less dense and you're going to make less power. Looking at the cylinder heads, this is where the intake is going to sit. You can see the intake runners here again, as well as this exhaust port. So now we can talk about the gaskets. This is the average gasket you will find at an auto parts store, but then you have performance gaskets. And what is the difference? So looking at the gaskets, they look very similar, but this one up here is the performance one, and it doesn't mean that it's going to seal any better necessarily, but it does come with a couple extra features. This gasket will come with some extra goodies. They're these little almost bread loaf looking pieces, and they can either restrict that exhaust flow by making this hole smaller, or you can completely block it off. This is what it looks like on the intake. So as you can see right here, we have that exhaust passage. We can either restrict it and make the hole a little bit smaller, or we can completely block it off. That is going to completely stop the exhaust gases from traveling through the crossover of this intake, therefore not giving us extra heat. The aluminum already transfers heat really well. It's connected to the block, so it's going to get hot regardless, so why add that extra heat? Yes, it was engineered that way and it does serve a purpose, but in our application, we're not going to need it. Also, if you already purchased one of these gaskets and don't want to spend the extra money on a performance gasket, there is ways to modify these. A lot of people make a block off plate out of a piece of aluminum and RTV it in place. That will work perfectly fine, but since we already have this one, we're going to use it. That's enough yapping though, let's get this thing installed. Before anything, we're going to go ahead and clean off the mating surfaces, and it was already cleaned before. Since we rebuilt the engine, we cleaned the heads and stuff. Now with the surfaces cleaned, we're gonna check to see how this gasket fits here. And sometimes they might not align perfectly with the intake ports here. Sometimes they're a little bit off and can be covering it just a tad. And if that happens, you can just cut these tabs that hold it in place, shift it around. But it looks like ours is pretty good here. But if we take a look at our coolant passage right here, it has this little notch that looks like it would be for another bolt hole. But if we take a look at the other style gasket, it does not have this, this notch right here. If anyone knows why that is, let me know down in the comments. But we're gonna cut that out because it is inhibiting the coolant flow. So I'm going to outline where it should be cut. As you can see, it is still covering quite a bit, about 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch right here where this blue line is. So we're gonna make another cut. In terms of width, it is about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch thinner than this one. So we're gonna go ahead and cut this as well. Now these match up a little bit better. And now, with a little bit of modification, we have the full size of the coolant port. So both sides have now been modified. We did not do the rears because, as you can see from the intake, we have our intake runners right here and a coolant port, but there is no coolant ports on the rears. So no coolant is going to pass through the rear ports, so there's no point in cutting it. Also, because of the age of these heads, this coolant port is now corroded and not flat. All the surface is very rough here. To help with those imperfections, we're gonna place a light bead of RTV around the coolant passage on the gasket to help seal some of those imperfections and maybe some of the imperfections that we left in the gasket when we cut it. With the intake gaskets now installed, we're gonna lay a small bead about 1/4 of an inch thick on these ends. These usually come with cork gaskets, but nobody ever uses them, and the people who do and it works for them, they should go buy a lotto ticket. Also, it is a bit difficult to drop the intake right where it needs to be on the first try, so I've made these guides, which are essentially just bolts with the head cut off. That way we can thread them into place. I was about to forget. Before we can throw the intake on, we gotta throw these little blocking plates or bread loaves. And if you're making these yourself out of some recycled sheet metal or aluminum, make sure it's thick enough where it won't blow by. Alrighty, now we can see these guides in action, which is pretty easy that I have this much access, but we're going to line up these guides and let her rest. Cool, with the intake now in place, we're going to run a couple bolts through so we can take the guides out and it'll stay in place. Also, one thing to point out, Edelbrock recommends using hardened steel washers along with the bolts for their aluminum intakes. And of course, I'm gonna use my favorite tool for this. Now we can take out these guides. We're going to follow Edelbrock's recommendations for the torque specs. We have to do it in 2 steps. One step of 10 foot-pounds and then another step of 20 foot-pounds. All right, that's 10 foot-pounds. Now 20 foot-pounds. All right. So once again, this intake is a Performer RPM, which does sit a tiny bit taller than the Performer 289 version. It also has a different RPM range compared to the Performer 289. This intake shines at 1500 RPM to 6500 RPM, which the Performer 289 version shines between idle and 5500 RPM. And I know some of you guys are thinking, Angel, if you rev it to 6500, it might blow up. It might. Truth be told, guys, I want to hear this engine scream. And if that means we're going to have to pull another block out of the junkyard in a couple thousand miles, so be it. I chose this specific intake with the higher RPM range because of the cylinder heads that we have. These are GT40P heads, which are known to be one of the best flowing factory heads for the small block Ford application. So not only are these already really good flowing heads, but these specific ones on this engine are ported. So with the combination of the ported GT40P heads as well as the RPM intake, this engine is already set up for some really good airflow. And for the people wondering about cam specs, we are currently running a custom grind E303 cam. I don't know what the grind specs are, that's just what came with the engine. We could probably further enhance the airflow characteristics of this engine with a bigger cam, But that's what we have for now, so that's what we'll run. All right, now we can get into these guys. These are Hedman Shorty headers, which might look like a tangled mess, but it is because each one of these tubes is an equal length, which in theory should give us better scavenging, and with better scavenging comes better performance. Once again, I got these off of Facebook Marketplace for $80. You can't even buy these anymore. They are out of stock, out of production, but they did come, oddly enough, with some was folded, now ripped. Kit did come with gaskets as well as a sealed bag of hardware. These are meant for the 302s or small block Ford platforms, but there is a chance that these might not fit. Might not fit because these GT40P heads, although they are great, have one big flaw. The spark plug angle often gets in the way of most headers, which is something we're gonna find out right now. Well, I'm a bit confused on what to do here. The gasket that came with the kit was already folded, and when I went to open it up, it obviously split like you guys saw. I think I might want to run these. It is torn in the middle, but I mean, there's no sealing surface right there. That doesn't really matter. All right, we're gonna use these anyway. I cut off a little bit of excess on the middle right here, so when they are in line, they are not going to overlap each other, causing any sealing issues. We are also going to install some Motorcraft Platinum plugs, which was the original equipment that this year engine came with. These guys are gonna get 15 foot-pounds. All right, so there is that spark plug angle that commonly gives issues for headers. So let's see what happens. Hopefully it doesn't give us any issues. Hopefully. What if, and hear me out here, we install these backwards and then we hook up a giant turbo here. All right, split gasket and a couple bolts in place. Would it have been easier to do this with the engine out of the car? Yes. Am I smart and think of it ahead of time? No. I also put some anti-seize on the threads of the manifold bolts. Since a regular socket won't fit in here, we can't really torque these to spec, so we're gonna torque them down to German specifications of Guten tight. All right, we finally got this side bolted down. It took longer than I would have liked, but I think I'm already seeing some potential issues with them. Right here we can see all of our spark plugs, and the first and last one look like they have plenty of clearance, but the two in the middle are awfully close to the tubes themselves. I can't even put my finger in between the tube and the spark plug, that's how close they are. And this one, I have about maybe ½ an inch of space. We can do a lot of things here, but bending spark plugs isn't one of them. You can see just how close it is to that pipe. That would for sure melt our spark plug wire. I know some people would hit it with a hammer until there's enough clearance, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to restrict the airflow or the exhaust flow. There is a gap though, it's not touching just yet. Well, before we decide on what we're going to do about the clearance issue, let's see what the other side looks like. Houston, we have a problem. Oh man, this sucks. The issue here is no longer spark plug clearance because the header itself is hitting on the motor mount. Specifically, this tube right here, it protrudes way downwards, which is even more interesting because this side has miles of clearance between the header and the motor mount. We can't even get this to sit into its proper place because it's hitting. And I know what some of you are thinking. Angel, didn't you make the motor mounts to fit with the headers? Yes, I did. But when we had relocated the engine and built the motor mounts and made sure everything fit, we were using these headers to do all of the mock-up, which, I mean, these would work. They're just very ugly, and I didn't really want to use them. Oh man, these looked so cool in here. And what's worse is that this side for sure had enough clearance for the spark plugs, but it's not gonna work. As you can see, we're making contact right there. This sucks, but we do have options. We do have options. Option number one, we use different headers. Option number two, which I don't think I'm going to do, is bend that tube until it fits. I don't want to do that because by the time it fits, that tube's going to be completely closed. Or option number 3, which I am kind of tempted to do, we could modify that that motor mount right there in order for it to fit. Looking at it from above, the tube makes contact right about here. So we could probably cut this into place. There's nothing under here, under this plate right here. So we can probably cut it or notch it and then fill it back into place, leaving enough clearance for that header to fit. That is a lot of fabrication and a lot of designing and thinking just for me to use that header. This one for sure works, but it is just not as cool as this one, and I was already kind of in love with the idea of using equal length headers. So the header is sitting there the best I could get it. As you can see, we are about 1 inch to the right and maybe about 1/4 inch down. So therefore this tube right here needs to go 1 inch to the left and about 1/4 inch down. So therefore we would need to cut this motor mount in order to get that 1 inch to the left and 1/4 inch down movement, which, if I'm being honest, sounds kind of fun. It's been a while since we cut and welded things on this channel, so I don't know. Let me know what you guys think I should do. Should I just go with another set of headers, or should I modify that engine mount? Another thing to think about if we were to modify that engine mount is our rack and pinion. Is the steering shaft going to get in the way of the headers? Well, to accurately know that, I need a steering shaft and a couple of U-joints, but I don't have any of that, so we'll deal with that later. Let's install something else. I very much want to install this distributor because, well, we have this open hole here, and if I drop anything in there, it's gonna be a not so good day. So taking off the distributor cap. Oh, another thing. We're gonna oil the drive gear. So we want this rotor to be facing towards the rear, just slightly to the left. That will place us at cylinder number 1. All right, so our distributor is now facing towards the rear. That is where our number 1 cylinder plug will be. With the efforts of not trying to drop anything in the engine, I'm going to place some tape to cover up these intake ports. Well, we took 1 step forward and a couple steps upside down because I'm not too sure what to do about this header situation, but we have an intake and a dizzy on. Also, I see you guys have been busy with the PO box. Starting off with this, I can already see what it is. Well, I'll make sure to keep these handy on my next flight. Next up, oh yeah, this is pretty damn cool. It's a punch set, so our drilling is going to be a lot more efficient, and it's going to save our drill bits a bit too. Next up, oh yeah, thank you. I have been needing one of these forever. Shout out to Robert Lugo. Next up, ah yeah, this is pretty cool. If you'll notice, there's a bunch of different sizes. And if you watch the previous Mustang video where we're working on the engine, you will know that it is for our water pump because the geniuses at Ford decided to put 10 different size bolts on the water pump. Shout out to Michael Sanchez. Next up, there is no way. There is no way. Nice. This gets me excited. This is actually badass. It's a flexible head for the impact, and it also came with some drill bits. This would have been perfect when we were drilling this this pass-through right here in the previous wiring video. Oh man. Thank you, Alchemy Forge, for sending these over. I will definitely be using that. Last but not least, the stop shop. I'm intrigued. Oh yeah. Guys, it just keeps getting better. This is 25 feet of copper brake tubing that is gonna go straight into the Scrapstang. That is perfect timing because as soon as we get this engine running, the next goal is to get this thing driving, obviously, but we can't get it driving if we can't get it to stop. So shout out to Kevin for sending over this brake line. Let me know if you guys would like to see a video of us bending and installing this brake line on the Scrapstang. Guys, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much, from buying parts for the Scrapstang to sending over tools to even just liking and subscribing. You guys are making all of this possible. Holy crap, we just hit 10K. We're about to hit 11. Let's go for 100. This Scrapstang is closer now than it ever was before to burning the rubber off of these tires. Once again, thank you to every single one of you. Also, don't forget to enter that giveaway. We will continue the work on the Scrapstang in the next video. With that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.